Hi. Hi, can you hear me? There we go. My name is Sheila Jackson. I'm with the TOPS program. I'd like to welcome you to this joint meeting of the M&E and KM task forces. Want to introduce you very quickly to my partner in crime. This is Ms. Edith Mutaya. She is the chair of the M&E task force. I am the chair, more or less, of the KM task force. And this is something we're really excited about. This is something we heard from you guys. You really wanted to get these two task forces together to talk about how they work together, and how we can help each other move forward. There's a lot of confusion. I shouldn't say confusion, but maybe things aren't clear exactly on how where KM ends and begins, where M&E ends and begins, and so all that types of things. We're doing that. So we're really happy that you are all here. And we're also very excited that we have a big online presence. You'll have to excuse us. We are having a couple of technical issues, but we are working them out. The biggest one is the fact that you need a key for the bathroom. And we just found out those keys aren't working. When they are working, they will be put right up on here on this little cabinet, and it's just down the hallway. So I apologize, and we'll get that figured out for you. So the first thing I want to go ahead and do is we're going to do an icebreaker. We want you guys, I know a lot of you know each other, but we want you to get know each other a little bit better. And this is TOPS, and we do icebreakers. It's an unwritten rule. It's part of our cooperative agreement if you didn't know. So we're just going to do kind of a standard one here. I'd like you to get up, and I would like you to pair up with someone you don't know or maybe don't know that well is a better way to put that, and introduce yourself. Give them your name, your organization, and also why are you interested in today's meeting? Why did you come here? And for our folks online, you see we have a big online presence. We're going to be incorporating them also, and they have their warm-up question there, so it's going to be very nice. We're going to be able to include them in the reporting out as well. So please go ahead, get up, introduce yourself, meet someone for a couple minutes, so don't be shy. Okay. Okay, if I could ask you all to sit down, can you hear me? Can I ask you all to sit down, please? All right. Okay. So do I have any volunteers to kind of give us a little synopsis, introduce the person they talked to, and kind of share with us why that person came to the meeting? And bless your heart.
Yes, well, might as well get started. This is Marta from World Vision, and she, like me, also looks at things from a capacity development point of view. There's so much overlap there. And also, like me, trying to figure out the linkages between capacity development and M&E.
All right. Wonderful. Anybody else? Lauren, I'm going to bring the microphone back to you. I'd like you to report out online.
We can just activate my microphone, so we're okay. Oh, awesome. But so online, there are many people joining us from different areas. There are some people joining us from Malawi and Bangladesh. also West Virginia. And then some of the things that they are interested in are to see how M&E can better showcase the KM results. Sorry about that. And then also learning and exchanging views and coordinating with knowledge management to better improve and clarify the rules so that they can contribute to the different programs.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's interesting.
Great. Thank you.
We have people with us from all over. Plus in here. One thing, the bathroom passes now work for those of you who are in the room, so please go get those. Once again, we're sorry, men's right out the door, women's is down the hall. Those of you online, I can't help you. So there we go. All right, so thank you everybody for that. So what we're going to do is move right into some small group work. As you can tell, you're all in these tables to work together. Also, Zachary and Aaron's table, if you guys want to combine with Aaron, Sujata, and Marta's table, that's fine, or you can stay where you want. But the first small group exercise is what we're going to do is you all have flip chart paper and you all have markers and write in there. And what we want you to do is just brainstorm and write down. Imagine in your organization where monitoring and evaluation and knowledge management are completely uncoordinated and dysfunctional. What does that look like? So, and some of you may work in this every day, so it'll be very easy for you to kind of do that. But please go ahead and take about 15 minutes here and brainstorm and make notes on the flip chart paper. You've got the markers there of what that looks like. And we'll get Zachary's table. I believe you don't have one. We'll get you a piece real quickly. Okay, or if you want to combine. All right, does anybody have any questions that I explained that? Does everybody understand? Those of you online, Lauren and Patrick are going to be guiding you through this exercise as well.
Yeah.
Cool. I can call you all back. I can call everybody back. All right, folks online, they have some technical difficulties, so go ahead and keep working, but we're going to go ahead and start reporting out here in the room, and then we'll have them report out. So I would like one brave volunteer to be the first one to give us their top 3 or 4 things to how does an organization look when KM and M&E are completely dysfunctional. And Miss Edith here, the lovely Miss Edith, will be taking notes up on a flip chart. And for those of you online, we will be making these notes on the whiteboard function of the Adobe Connect. So don't worry, you'll see everything that's going on in the room. All right, so who is first? Michelle. Oh, bless your heart. Hold on. So our group, I'm sure, like many others, had a lot listed, but the 3 we really concentrated on were development of different tools for reporting. So M&E probably has a core set of indicators, and then KM might just kind of tack on some or make some without coordinating, and then those are also being collected probably different ways in countries. So that's not good. The second one was around not having a defined boundary between the 2 and clear responsibilities between the 2. So I know a lot of organizations, or at least the ones I've worked in, learning is kind of at least the buzzword that is the same across the 2, but it's often not clear what that actually means. So if you're a MEL team versus an M&E specialist, or if you're an M&E specialist versus a meal specialist, what does that mean? And the third we came up with was that M&E and KM planning are often not done together. And KM we find is often reactive, even though M&E seems to be kind of proactive and is thought of proactive in the sense that if there's a project, it's very always clear that M&E needs to be at the table to help design that. But it's often not the case that KM is invited or that there's somebody from KM even available to do that. Those were our 3. Okay.
Thank you. You will now be placed into conference. To mute your line, press *6. To unmute, press #6.
There's not understanding what KM is, and so this leads to that, as was raised earlier, the definition of boundaries, understanding what roles and responsibilities are, which is part of our next part. Is if you don't know what KM is, then KM becomes everything, and it kind of gets pulled in all sorts of directions, and our conversation is like KM often sits at the hub of M&E communications and data management or information management. And if you don't have it clearly defined in what its role is, then it often gets pulled into one of those directions. Quite often it's into the comms direction, and so then it becomes communication of what we're doing as opposed to what is the high point of what we're doing or what we're actually learning. Or maybe it gets into the data management, and then it gets into the tools, and then that's just the technology, and you wind up with a lot of platforms that people don't actually use. And then how this all plays into understanding what we know at the field. So again, that lack of coordination between that breaks down what we're knowing in the field.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. So Emily, Chloe, Emily, all right. Oh, okay.
Thank you very much. Well, we had a couple that were really very similar to what other tables had, and we had 3 that we put separately on our chart, but we really decided they're really different aspects of the same things. So we probably call that our number 1 since we mentioned it 3 times, which is no local empowerment. What does it mean for knowledge management to be everyone's job? And we're not really holding people accountable. So it all goes back to roles and responsibilities are unclear, both at headquarters and in the field. Another one we looked at is that there's,
Could you hold your microphone a little
bit further away?
There
Is
you go.
better?
That's better.
There's rote collection of data often without any analysis, without answering the so what question, without specifying what the next steps are to take care of the things that are uncovered in the data. And this particularly came out in a workshop that we attended on gender disaggregation about a week ago, when we found that most organizations were simply saying, and these are the number of males and these are the number of females, but no discussion of what that meant, the implications for the project, or what to do about it. And our third one is with regard to systems that aren't really compatible, different frameworks, different indicators, different software, and hard to compare across organizations and even across projects within the same organization.
Great. Thank you very much. These are all great points, and I see, at least in the room, a lot of nods. I think a lot of us face these challenges every day, so it's a good thing. All right, so now we're going to switch it to online. And Lauren, who do we have first?
So actually, Megan from Save the Children is going to be reporting out to us.
Wonderful. Thank you, Megan. Go ahead.
Okay, I hope you can hear me. Our online discussion involves several people, so our top kind of theme that comes out of our discussion was really about the learning not being used well in what's being disseminated or captured in knowledge management if M&E is not connecting with knowledge management. And then there's also the risk on the flip side that we're not catching issues with implementation and really sharing that information in our messaging and what we're capturing as knowledge from our organization. So really, when they're not connected, you have some messaging that's going out that might not be based on evidence and current real-time data. And on the flip side, you might have the issue of you're not really learning from other things that have been shared from knowledge management and reapplying them in your monitoring and evaluation questions if the connections aren't there. This is another topic that was not really part of what our group online discussion, but something based on the other conversations that has occurred to me. It sounds like some people are using the word learning as the definition for knowledge management. And I know that in some organizations, learning is considered part of the monitoring and evaluation function as well. So I just throw that out to the room to kind of think about that. I don't think learning has to be one or the other. It can be both. And that's where the nexus is, just to be careful in how we frame the roles of each.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Okay, on the next group online. Lauren, the next group online? We only have one. Oh, well, that worked out nicely. Okay. So I think first thing I'd like to just ask, does anyone have any initial reactions to everything they have heard? Yes, it's the same. They did the same exercise. So like they have a whole list like you did, but they only reported out their top 3 or 4. Yeah. So does that make sense? No. Yeah. So any initial thoughts? Okay. So now that we've talked about how bad everything looks without KM and M&E coordinating, now we get to do the fun part. This is the part. This is your dream session. Throw it all at what does an organization look at when M&E and KM are working together? They're in perfect harmony. Life is good. So I'm going to have the same type of and use, everything. Throw it at you. And this is your time to build your organization. What it will really look like. So please, once again, on flip chart paper, brainstorm, talk about this amongst your tables, and write out how your organization will look if everything was awesome. Yeah, very good. So do that. So, one thing, don't think about money or anything else. Nothing is a boundary here. So, yeah, I know. So, like I said, it's your dream. So please go ahead and do that, and good luck.
Okay, so I think we're...
Emily, write faster. All right, here we go. All right. Okay. All right, so we ready to report out on what your organization looks like when knowledge management and M&E are completely together in harmony and everything's going great. Who would like to be first to report out? All right. I am Mia from Save the Children. So for us, we came up with a few different ideas. One thing was co-located in the same unit. So whether that means reporting structure, whether that means we're on the same project, whether that means we're actually sitting, in proximity to each other, we think that would be really, really helpful for M&E and CAM collaboration. Also, clear definitions of roles. Making sure the job descriptions are clear and we know what one person is doing versus another. Also, funding to resource both. So, oftentimes CAM isn't always included in proposals. It'd be helpful if we had someone from the get-go on a project working with M&E so we can be more proactive. In addition, integrating on the same system. So, we don't always have, as CAM people, we don't always have access to M&E systems. It would be great if we could integrate those two, so that way there'd be more sharing and collaboration, and we'd also understand the tools better. Also, collaborating to problem solve. So we have two different skill sets. M&E takes a very important skill set. CAM takes a very important skill set. We can learn and grow if we collaborate, if we talk, if we look at each other not as in competition, but as like sort of crucial halves to the same coin. And then, again, planning together at the HQ and at the project level, really working together from the get-go and not just, kind of tagging KM whenever is needed. Okay, thank you. So some great points. Appreciate it. Okay, next. Next victim. Lauren, are they ready online? Or not yet. There you go.
Sure.
All right. Again, here you go.
Okay, so our group said around the same characteristic of planning together that it's really great from the beginning if you can have a learning agenda in common with the knowledge management and the M&E staff so that the questions have input from both and that learning comes from both and that we're using those questions to guide our planning and on programs and also how we're implementing and capturing data and sharing it between each other. So that was our first point. Our second point that we discussed was if by working together we can have data that's better presented, so a more ownership of results and continually improve because we're working together through coordination, frequent coordination, making sure that we're showing results and using data that informs decisions. So this ownership of the results is then shared amongst the organization, not just with monitoring and evaluation, but also with knowledge management about what we're gaining from the results. And then finally, we just said that both M&E and knowledge management should work on products that are then disseminated, that both have a role and a perspective, and by collaborating together, the messages get out better.
All right, thank you. That was great. Appreciate everyone online. All right, so I am just going to walk up to the next table and hand the microphone to Emily, and she's going to report out. Okay, so I'm going to skip the ones that other people have already said to the best of my ability. So one thing we talked about that I think is a little different is that everybody in the organization is actually sort of valuing and acting on KM and M&E and sort of has bought into the idea of using that to make their own jobs better. And that's everybody from the field level all the way up to the CEO, and not just the knowledge managers and the M&E people play nice with each other, that it's a bigger investment. And we also talked about having enough people to do all of these things, right? Part of the stretch right now is not just that roles and responsibilities aren't clear, but that they all sit with one or maybe two people if you're lucky. Harmonizing systems with a really small number of priority items so that we can kind of start to compare things across programs, across donors, across organizations. Better of a small number of sort of harmonized systems or items. So if you're talking universal indicators or whatever, that we don't solve that by having 500 indicators that everyone has to have all the time. We talked about better, more accessible, more searchable IT platforms where we can actually put our data and then other people can find stuff on the back end. And we talked a little bit about using dashboards and mobile and some other ways to think about that, but being honest that IT is a part of the solution, even though it's not the solution all by itself, and that most M&E and KM people are not IT people, even though sometimes they have to pretend like they are on TV. And then making sure that all of our systems are focused for maximum impact so that everything is getting fed back into our implementation and the focus is on the communities where we work and the changes we want to see. Okay, did I miss anything, my group? Oh, excellent. Thank you. Thank you. All right. And so here we go. Aaron's going to be our last report out.
All right. Thank you. And I just have to give a quick shout out to Antonia Wolf and John Nicholson, who I see online, who I used to work with. So hi, guys. So I think we took the whole sort of blue sky approach pretty seriously and stayed very top level. We broke down our top 3 things into the themes, let's say, of objectives and of inspiration. I think the most classic KM piece under objectives would be that staff have easy access to information that will allow them to achieve especially project objectives. So you can imagine some type of database system, lessons learned, et cetera. But there's a wild number of other ways we could conceive of that. And then other things that I think others have kind of covered, but we're sort of grouping up in a way, are just the act of actively articulating what are the connections between KM and M&E so that people across the organization or project can understand them, and that's just simply basically this list that we're creating is that act of articulating these connections, and so figuring out a way that this can be presented to people so that they see the connections more clearly, and then ideally would allow sort of staff to get on board with how they can work together. And this idea of other inspiration, we again hit on leadership, which comes up constantly. If you don't have a champion, if you don't have a leader who's engaged with either KM or with M&E, or ideally the nexus of both, then it's not going to get terribly far in how that reflects what an organization becomes capable of. And something nice that kind of came up was that there might be this continuum from leadership not being engaged with either KM or M&E to maybe they're highlighting the positives or what's coming out, or even just like working with them a little bit, to they're actively engaging, they are receiving information from these groups of people and what they're doing, they're contributing to what they could be doing. And again, just this idea that all of these on both sides of KM and M&E are linking to organizational objectives, which are clearly defined, and again to project objectives, which are also clearly defined. So these are like very fundamental things out of which these other pieces can be achieved.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right, so everybody's report out. Now, before we get into our next activity, I wanted to kind of open this up. Does anybody have anything, comments, questions about what has been put out so far, reactions? I'll go ahead and start because I do, so this is, all about me. But one of the things that really got me was in the key issues for dysfunction is the fact that KM seems to be reactive where M&E seems to be proactive. And I think we've kind of hit on some of that, the fact that KM's not always funded, we don't know how to define it. But I was kind of wondering, anybody else, do they feel that way? Why do they think that is? And is M&E truly proactive versus reactive, and how we see those two can support anyone? Anyone have any ideas on that? Yes, ma'am.
I think M&E is often, is always planned within the project, whereas KM is like... So I think M&E is always planned within projects, whereas KM is often optional. So I think that I would say that's the main difference.
I would add too that the reason M&E seems to be indispensable is because people know they have to tell the story of what happened with their project in order to convince their donors that it was worth investing in, and why the KM doesn't have that same illustrious note, I'm not sure. It's like a challenge for KM.
I think one thing is that KM, it just isn't very clearly defined in the way that M&E is, and so people sort of use KM as a substitute for magic, basically. KM is going to solve this problem, which done right it will, but if you don't know what you're asking for or what you mean, it's really hard to be proactive. It's not written into budgets. But one thing I think is also critical is that M&E is often very much at the project level, and KM is often supposed to be the intersection between projects. And so the entire way our organizations are built doesn't make that easy, because it's all very project-focused, deliverable-focused. This is what a donor is asking us for in this space, and KM is at least supposed to be helping connect between those, but nobody's funding that gap in between. They're funding one piece at a time.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting with what you just said, because part of that, with how you put this, part of that is a funding issue, because it's not, but also some of the going across lines and in between projects, that's actually more organizational. So I know sometimes we really almost, it's not in funding, and that's kind of default, but I think we're seeing here that it's not just in the funding, it's the way organizations are structured and how they haven't quite embedded learning or knowledge management or whatever we want to call it today. So how about online? Any reactions or any discussion? No, it's okay. A lot of chatter. Yeah. So,
would anyone online like to speak out on this topic? If you would just activate your mic, you can speak to the group. One mention was that to have periodic meetings of senior management on KM and M&E coordination and to use that information. And I think that goes back to what you were talking about, it being stressed at the organizational level. So that's something that is really needed.
Great, thank you. Okay, yes, ma'am.
I'm seeing a comment from online from Waduda Care. And I agree. The idea of having examples of projects that have done this well and have that be more front-facing, I think would be really helpful for the larger community and perhaps for organizations that are not, from the senior management level, really thinking about the integration of the two and how they work together.
And I just want to give a quick shout out to Wadu, who I met in Bangladesh when we had our last knowledge sharing meeting. So, hey Wadu. He took a really great picture for us. Okay, so now we've talked about all these things. We know what, it looks like when KM and M&E aren't integrated. We know, we have this goal or this perception of what they do look like when they are integrated. But what we want to do is we want to go forward. What can we work on together as joint task force to kind of discuss more in depth some of these issues that were raised, to possibly explore what other people are looking for or working on to kind of integrate M&E and KM together, have them work together. So you'll notice that for those of you in the room, there are colored dots on your table. And what I would like you to do is we have a couple of pieces of paper here, put one more up here, of key issues for dysfunction, key issues for, I'll call them utopia, the utopia version. I want you to take 3 dots and go around to everything that was put on those and what are the 3 things you would like to kind of do a deeper dive in together as a joint task force. So if you go ahead and online, we're going to have an exercise for you where you can vote through a poll to also rank your top 3 things that you would like to explore more through these task forces. So come on up here, and I've got one more to put up, and please take a few minutes. Just 3. You don't get all of them. 3. And this is not color coordinated, so don't feel you have to get one of each. Or if we get more yellow on one, we're definitely doing one. No, that's not how it happens. So, but yeah, only 3 votes. This isn't Chicago. I'm from Chicago. No ghost voting, please. Thank you. Okay, so please finish your voting in about the next 30 seconds or so, and then we'll go ahead and look at what's got the most dots. Okay. Okay, thank you all for voting and making your voice heard. Very important in our democracy here. It's very interesting. First, let's go on what happened online. And just so everybody knows online, is we are projecting the Adobe Connect screen into the room so they see exactly what you guys are writing and talking about. So I probably should have told you that in the beginning. So, okay, but it's interesting. So your top three are number one at 72%. Or almost 73, more accessible and more searchable databases, technology, staff has easy access to information. The next one at almost 55%, clear designation of roles, articulating the roles, both areas and the connections therein. And then the next one at 45%, increase collaboration and planning together. Okay, and so the top ones we have in the room, oh, where's another time? Oh, another one. We have a tie. Sorry. Thank you, Nestor and Aaron. Systems-oriented for maximum impact, feeding back to the field. Okay. And in the room, by far and away, the one that got the most dots were KM was not well known. Clear definition is key. And so the next one, tie. Okay, so the next one we have a tie was need leadership. What is the rest of need leadership? We just need leadership. Okay. Lean buy-in and engagement. Thank you. Okay. The next tie was have a common learning agenda and input from both. Okay. All right, and then we had a lot of other threes that would tie no local empowerment, uncoordinated work, creating gaps. Systems created for maximum impact. Learns anything's done well. So it's very interesting where the highest one we have here in the room is KM's not well defined, but all of you out there online, it's more accessible and more searchable databases, technology, staff have easy to access information. Now, I'm just throwing this out there and I want your reactions. Could that be because we have a good many people that are out in the field that are online versus all of us here who really benefit from the fact that we have really good internet connection. We've got everything here. So are we seeing some differences between what's happening at HQ and what's happening at the field? Yep. Dan?
I will say at the Health Policy Plus project, that is the one online that got to 72%. That's our number one issue right now that we're talking about. So it is even a KM problem. And we have an open office, and we all sit and we can literally see each other. And we still don't know who each other are or who has what skills or whatever. So
that's very interesting. Yeah, I think that goes to, at one point I was at a presentation one, and someone said, oh, collaboration, that just means working together. And I was managing the meeting, so it took everything for me not to be just like, no, that's not right. How about anybody else? Anyone online or anyone else have reaction to any of that?
I see that when the people are asking about database technology, we need to be very careful because that was in the past knowledge management. When they just started, they were thinking that database and technology, it is what it is. And it has been already proved that it was a failure. Just having a database is not enough. It's more than that. So I'm not against that, but I think we need to add something else, not just having the database or technology. Because if we have a big database and people don't go and search for that, it's going to be like any other thing that has happened in the past.
Right. So you're saying it's not just the technology, it's connecting the technology and the people together. Okay. How about anyone else? We have anything online? Lauren, you want to read anything out? Or?
Well, they were discussing, so we do have a fair amount of headquarters people online, and they were discussing it's more along what you were saying, where it's the people and the technology working together and not just a problem with the field. So.
All right, great. Anybody else? Any other reactions to anything or any one of these? So, I think we got quite a lot to kind of work on. One of the things I think we'll do is that Edith and I, and along with all of our teams, will go back and we'll see how we can move forward and, you know, how we can dive into some of these things. One of the things I do want to leave open, if you know of any examples of anybody who is doing this well, I have my hand raised. Please allow. Wadu wants to talk?
Yeah, just I would like to say 2 comments.
Please.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Wadu. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Wadu.
Okay, just I have 2 comments about the voting. I mean, one of the things is very clear that so far from the scheme it is clear that there is no issue related to funding and resources. So it is, I mean, area for thinking what is the, in that case, what are the barriers. In most of the cases, to do some good things, many cases the first thing came up as a barrier that we don't have the resources or there is no fund allocation for that. But from the voting it is said that, well, it is not the case. So it might be the mindset from many of the parts who are dealing with these things. So we need to work over there, how can change the mindset. And another part is, well, we are giving all the way about the data management, all those things. But to me, the most important things are how we can convince the people for better utilization the data or buying the data, rather than expecting, well, my product will be seen by everyone will love this product, they will go over that. But the people who are producing the things, how the many information can be transferred to the people needs, at the same time how this can be mixed with the knowledge management part. This is the 2 areas so far there is huge room to work on it. Thank you so much for allowing me time.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Wadu. Appreciate that. And thank you for also staying up in the middle of the night to be here. He's in Bangladesh. Anybody have any reaction to what is?
And you are most welcome.
Okay.
You are most welcome to visit Bangladesh at any time. Bye-bye.
Especially the whole piece about information and people getting that. Okay. Zachary? I can tell the wheels are turning.
I would agree that the funding, to me, the funding, the point that should be highlighted is funding in terms of the people needed to actually implement it, not necessarily having a huge budget to actually do it, because at its core, KM especially is about people and connecting people and facilitating interactions. And if you understand that and everybody is on that same page, that it's part of what KM is about, then you're not necessarily having to spend a whole lot on big budgets for databases or whatnot, because databases, to me, that's part of the enterprise. That should be in whatever information officer, whatever data group, and they should be part of the conversation. But KM shouldn't really have that as part of its tasks. So if we were to define the roles and responsibilities really clearly, then I think we could have a lot more achieved with lower budgets per se, but it needs to be defined well, because otherwise we're taking everything on and it winds up being too much and it winds up diluting all of our efforts, because it's everywhere.
So I think that kind of goes back to, at least in the room, one of our most popular was how we define KM, and I think wrapped in there is another thing. When you're defining KM, you also need to make clear what are the roles and responsibilities. So, anybody else? No? Okay.
The people online would just like to comment a little bit more on the staff. Okay. So some people were saying that staff need to have access to data so that they can analyze the data for their own customizable and varying needs. And so that seemed to be a pretty common thread online. that access needs to be just available so that each person can do what they need to do with it.
And so when they say access to data, are they talking about M&E data as in how to program better, or is there certain parts of knowledge management data to go ahead and do kind of the knowledge management tasks, or do they not see a difference in those two?
I am not sure.
Okay, no, that's fine. I'm just throwing it out there. It doesn't have to, you know, these are all just kind of things. But I think that's a lot of times, at least from I think when we're talking about data, I think more about M&E. Because I think about data, I think about the indicators, collecting statistics for M&E, and I don't think that way about knowledge management, ROI aside, and all those types of things. But there's definite room for interpretation and disagreement and that and everything else like that. Did someone online want to talk? I think we heard someone's microphone come on.
Yeah, it was mine. I'm not sure if you can hear me. It's Megan. This is just maybe getting at the definition point of KM. It sounds like some people in some conversations are saying that learning from and data analysis is the function of KM. And in my experience, it hasn't been that. It's about capturing that learning and sharing it widely within organizations and outside of organizations and helping people understand what we have learned from implementation of programs. And that it's managing that knowledge, that learning, and who gets it, who receives it, and who interprets it. So I seem, even though our group online did not, I don't even think we had the option of defining KM as one of the big issues. I do think that that's a huge issue when we're trying to talk about what's most important, because it doesn't seem like to me that everyone's on the same page about what KM is versus M&E.
Yeah, I concur. Yeah, and we did, and this is my fault, not Lauren, so please don't blame her. We messed up the poll a little bit and didn't give you guys a chance to, along with your ranking, rank the dysfunction as well. But point well taken about the definition, and it seems like, yeah, and that's always been a very big problem with KM, the fact that we can't define it, you know, and I think that leads to a whole bunch of problems, so. And I just wanted to point out one thing that Ashley said, you know, when I made the distinction between data for M&E and KM, she said, I don't think there's a difference between the two. So there's another opinion.
I was just going to say, is it that we can't define it, or that, let's just say KM folks understand it, or there's an established definition or similar definitions, but that once we have to translate that to our organizations, our leadership, it can get lost in translation, and when you hear their thoughts on it, it can be quite different. And in my experience, they tend to focus heavily on systems and information extracting from those systems, and then they expect you to develop plans around that and strategy. So maybe, I don't know, just it's not so much the definition, but the communication and understanding of it.
One thing I saw, and forgive me, the type is really small up there, it's somebody from CRS, and it was a couple comments back, but he said it's not just about having the access, but the staff actually having the interest and the sort of appetite and mandate to access. So you can build the best database in the world, and if nobody cares or nobody's curious, and some of that goes back to funding. It's not about funding all of the sort of platforms and systems. It's about funding everybody's space to have a little bit of give so that you're not so packed that any staff member doesn't have as part of their mandate. You spend an hour a week or whatever it is actually going out and looking for information that will make your job better that you wouldn't get as part of just the regular running through your own to-do list. But that has to be for everyone in the organization.
Good point. Okay. All righty. So, yeah, Marta just very succinctly wrapped up what Emily said in the word culture. Yes. Okay. So, all right. So anything else from online or anyone else? Any last thoughts? Okay. Well, I really want to thank you all for coming and participating. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. Yeah. So this is from TD Jose from CRS. I think one of the key difference of understanding is between quantitative data versus information coming from studies, research, evaluations, success stories, etc. So we're kind of curious, what are the difference between those two? That's what Nestor's asking.
Well, it's again coming to the definition, what is data and what is information, and then what is knowledge. That is always that circle that is going around. And I think there's still knowledge management, still there is a lot of thoughts on that what is knowledge. And that is seen as the same, I think. And I don't want to get in the track of defining again what is data and what is information, because in M&E we already know that what it is. So.
I'd actually love to ask a question, especially for the CAM people among us. What definition are you using? Do you have an internal definition? Is there a definition that you're using from another organization like K for Health? How do you define knowledge management?
Anyone want to take a crack at that? I can give you the standard definition I use when I'm interviewing for a job, or the fact that, depending on what I'm doing every day, it really does kind of change. Patrick says NASA has a good definition, and they do. Yeah, NASA is an organization that's really figured out how to do KM very well. So, of course, NASA has unlimited resources. Yeah. No, but we can get you. It's on their website. I don't know what it is offhand.
We just have to create one for NGOs that we could then disseminate widely.
That might be something we try to do. Yeah.
What's the one you do? We need to create one, or just adopt one that is the best that's suited to us?
So we found that the one that Save the Children had that worked, like socializing and operation. I don't think it's or it's not that I don't think it works.
I think we should.
I think we should just have one that we all have in common, that all NGOs are, and it can be a little broad and vague, but I think that will help us move forward. I mean, it's like food security had a definition in 1997, right? And then from there, we could kind of move forward. People understood what it was. Before that, I think it meant different things to different people. I think CAM would be served well if we had a definition that was for nonprofits.
What I understand as far as the question.
Yeah, I just want to add a comment because I think this definition problem, I kind of agree with Erin that CAM, as practitioners, we do have a definition, but I think ours gets so general that when you say it to somebody, it doesn't mean anything then. So if you say it connects people to people and gets information when they need it, where they need it, it just doesn't, it means everything and nothing to somebody. So I think it does come down to is maybe along with the definition is a concrete case for funding CAM efforts at a project level and an organizational level.
Just real quickly, Patrick, thank you, Patrick, looked up NASA's definition of knowledge management, and knowledge management is getting the right information to the right people at the right time and helping people create knowledge and act upon information in ways that will measurably improve performance. And I just want to remind you, I know KM people, we get really bogged down in this whole how do we define this, but remember the purpose of what we are here for, to figure out how KM and M&E can work together. Yeah. So let's not, while we're sitting there theorizing about KM, let's not lose M&E in the shuffle. I'm not putting anyone down, but just kind of because I think the conversation has definitely gone into more of a KM conversation instead of looking at how these two work together.
I think what we need to do is come out with a strategy or examples how we can work together, M&E and knowledge management, so that we can have a common goal, which if we go at project level, have a common goal that is improve performance and also to share information. Because at the end of the day, also we need to use both of them to show the donor that we are doing what we were supposed to do. That.
I guess one thing, this is Ann here, that I think would be helpful would be, I would love a nice graphic a la Erin's style here that showed KM and M&E that help people on a most simple level try and understand how they're the different and how they are the same. You know, because sometimes distilling it like that, and then we can build up the depth behind it, but it's a good challenge.
Okay, so we are just about out of time, but I want to thank you guys. Besides what we voted on, both online and in person, there's some other things we did also come up with. I like the graphic idea. I like everybody's idea. I should have said that. Oops. Some other things we can work on. And we did, Melissa's been back there feverishly taking notes. We have recorded this, so there's various different ways we can go back and look at things to review. So, you know, I don't think I need to take a poll. I think everybody is okay with us having in the future joint task force meetings and trying to figure out ways to work together and coming up with some guidelines or suggestions around some of these common areas, challenges, and also cool things that we're doing and how do we keep promoting those. Correct? All right. So we will be in touch. Probably we will not be having a meeting before the new year. Yes, it is already at the end of the year. I want to thank everybody for participating, whether you came here to the RL Hotel in Washington or those of you who stuck with us online. And all your participation was greatly appreciated. And we look forward to seeing you in the future to continue this conversation and to forge ways we can work together. Thank you. Yeah.